Hey guys, thank you for watching. Today we're going to be talking about a topic related to React. We are going to be talking about hooks. And in this video, I'm going to try to explain a little bit behind what's going on when we call a hook, when we implement a hook. Because there's something interested that we probably don't think about when we use hooks. So I just want to explain a little bit what's going on behind the scene. So I'm going to divide this video into three parts. So in this first part, we are going to briefly talk about what a hook is and its relevance on React. And also, we're going to try to emulate creating a UseState hook implemented and see a unique behavior that I will try to explain after. So, the first thing we have to think is, or to talk about, is what's a hook? I mean, this video is not intending to teach about hooks in React, but instead, like I said, it's I'm going to uh, try to recreate the use state hook, at least the initial part, and so that we pay attention of all the things that um, work together in order to provide states management through hooks on React. So hooks were introduced on React in React 16.8, and they basically let you use state and other React features without writing a class. So React hooks were really important when React, the community, decided to make a transition from class-based components into function-based components. So we have an example here where we are using the useState hook and we are implementing it. We are creating a state which initially takes a value 0. And as you know already, or you might know already, this hook returns two elements. It's an array, and the first element is the placeholder or the variable that contains the updated value, the updated state or the state. And the second one is just a function which allows you to manage or update the state as you need. So this example here pretty much is a component that exposes a button. And when you click on the button, we basically update the count, the current state, and we increment the value from whatever uh, the current value is plus one. Let's pay attention to this function because, as you know, this is a component that gets rendered each time. For instance, each time we update the value of the hook, the component renders. And so, knowing that that's true, like each time that we call this function with the init value 0, should then make the count to be 0 all the time that each time the component renders. But as you know, that's not the case because if we try to pretty much implement the same thing here, so let's say I already have an app here, right? So instead of a counter, I just have a hook that takes a initial value blue and pretty much exposes a variable to hold color states and a function to update the color value. And you see that initially we print out that the color is blue, and if we call the set color function and we update the value, so let's say through a button. Yeah, let's do that. For instance, like let me just create a button just for the sake of explaining what we're trying to do here. So I'm going to create a parent div here. Um, this is just for demo purpose. And let's create a button. So we have button, and we want on click. We pretty much want to call a function, handle click, for instance. And when we call the function, we want to update the color to red, for instance. So set color equal red. So we pass red. So we're updating the value, and we want to call the handle click method like this. So when we click on the button, so we have the button here. Let me just add a name like click me. So when we click, it should change to red. Look, you see, it changes. So this is how we manage states on React. So hooks work, right? We know that already, but I just want to emulate creating this function, the useState hook. I just want to create my own version and see if it works. And this is pretty much the introduction of um, basically understanding hooks under the hood. So let's move forward. Let's move on, and I created a file here. I just want to see what happened when I called set color, and I just want to know if the value updates the same way that it does on our app.jsx file. So let's create our own version of a useState hook. So let's say const useState. So that's pretty much a function. You can see here, if we go back to this, you see that useState is a function. It takes a initial value. So let's go init value. And it returns an array. Let's call a value and set value. And so let's see, it's here, right? So when we call this function, we get an array with value and set value. We just name it whatever we want when we implement it. So, but because this is the inner implementation, we're just gonna call it value and set value within this function. So what do we want? We want that every time we call set value, which is a function, we want to update value to be equal to whatever new value we indicate, right? So value will be equal to new value, and we have to declare value. The value has to be a variable, not a constant, because we will be modifying it. So value will be equal to any value. If we don't specify any value initially, it's going to be undefined. Otherwise, value will be equal to the initial value as the way we do it here. So if I don't include any initial value, it's going to be pretty much undefined, null. Otherwise, it's going to be the initial value will be whatever value we pass. And like before, if I click here, it's going to be red because we have a button, and when we click on that button, we're pretty much calling this function, which called the inner method set color, and it changes the value to red. So, and that's pretty much what we have here. So we have useState, and this is the set color function that we call, and let's just implement it here so we don't get confused. So const, remember we have color and set color variables, and they're equal to use state, and then we'll call this blue, right? Blue. So let me just comment this out because I don't want you to get confused with this, right? So let's just focus on, I'm sorry. Let's focus on just, let me just remove this part for now. Let's focus just on the console, right? So pretty much I have the same thing I have here, right? So I have I call useState. I pass a initial value blue, and then I have two variables, one for the one that holds the value, the state, and the other one is for updating that. So I have the same thing here. So let's print out color, right? Remember when we printed out on the app.jsx file, we got blue. So if we do console.log here, color, it should be blue as well. Oh, hold on. Am I running this? Actually, I'm not running this script. So let me just include it in the, no. Let me just include it here briefly on the index. Let me just let me call the script here. So I also want the script, the JS file, and you see now that I'm getting blue. This is the beauty of programming. All right. So we're getting blue, which is exactly what we were getting when we um, call the UseState hook in the app, like implementing the one coming from React. So it's working. So now, if I remember when I clicked on the button, which pretty much called the set color function, and then with red, then which let me show you, which is pretty much this, right? So when we clicked, we called the handle click, and which called the set color with the red value. Um, Pretty much that's what we're doing here, right? So what would happen when we console log color? Is it going to be blue or red? It is blue. And the reason, and that's why I created this video, I made this video, is um, because this is a weird behavior that we might not expect if we are not aware of certain things when it comes to JavaScript. Like, it's like you can pretty much, if you read this lexically, which means by just following uh, the order, or just by paying attention to where things are expressed on the file, you might get confused because when we call this function, we said that we get an array with two elements inside, one for a state and the other one to is a function to control the state or to update the state. So we think, because when we look at this function, that when we call this function here, the set value, which is the one that we're calling here, lexically we know that value will be equal to new value. So which means that value, which is color, when we print it out, should be red and not blue. So what's going on? So what's going on is that this is an interesting topic, and it has to do with closure and private members on JavaScript. So this doesn't have anything to do with this behavior is right, and it doesn't have anything to do with React. This is pure JavaScript. This is how it works. So what's going on is that value is pretty much a private member inside of this closure. And a closure is pretty much a function that is that it's that itself is bundled um, to the out of scope of where it's being described. So it gets bounded with states or values or variables um, outside of its scope. For instance, as a value is bundled with the value variable. So, and that's why when we call this a value, this new value updates value, but that value is pretty much private within this useState function, unless we return it or we access it through a function. Because the way that you're supposed to read this implementation is that when you call this function, you get pretty much, let's say, a copy of what get returned, and that's it, right? For you to get new values of private members like this function, you will need to return it or access it through a function. And that's why color keeps being blue no matter how many times you change it, right? So it's gonna be blue all the time, so it's protected. It's inside of this lexical scope. It's inside of this closure, right? So there are ways of accessing like I said, accessing the updated value. Like for instance, if you create a get value function, which returns um, a copy of what the value is, and we expose it when we initially returned the array, get value, and then we call it each time. Like instead of just printing out color, we call get value. So you see that we get, I'm sorry, we get value here. I return it. Oh, I'm not exposing it here. Get value. So when I call it, you see that, okay, the first one was blue, the second one I updated to red and getting red, and then I updated the value to yellow. So now when I call get value, I get yellow. So, which is good. So we get access to a private member through a function. Um, but as you know from the previous example here, when we were using React, when we were implementing React, right? When we had this component, the API that React was exposing when we called the UseState did not include a function for accessing the state. Like for instance here, it gives us a variable, right? So it gives us color, not get value or get color or anything like that, but color. So what's going on? So something else must be happening, and that's exactly what I'm going to discuss on the second video. So we are going to see, or we're going to try to get this working, because what we get from React, like I said, is just this API, right? We get a color and set color. So we get two elements, and the way that we access the updated value is just by calling that variable like this. It's not a function, it's just a variable that we use to access the updated value, but the value doesn't seem to be updating. Why is that? If this is exactly what a useState function looks like, pretty much under the hood. And so that's what I'm going to discuss on a second video. And before we finish, I just want to mention that there's a key component that we're missing here, and it's the React engine. We're forgetting how the components renders. And that's probably where we can find some answers to this problem. Because pay attention to this. Each time that this component renders, right? So we take a look at the app component, we're pretty much calling the React.useState each time. So we know that each time we update we click this button, for instance, we're pretty much rendering this component over and over again if the value changes. Um, so app is supposed to be call each time, and this function is supposed to be instantiated or called. Sorry, I should say called every time. And then if that's true and nothing else is happening, then blue should be printed out here all the time and not red. So what's going on? We're just calling a function many times, this function, and the behavior should be this one, to be honest. But the value is updating. We're going to talk about that on the second video, but so far in this video, we learned about closures, private members, and lexical scope. And we also learned that once we return from a function like this, and we call a closure or an internal function that updates a outer value, like value, uh, we know that the only way for you to get access to the updated value is through a function, and that's it. Like there's no other way. And so yeah, so let me know what you think about this video. Comment below, like it, share with your friends, and also let me know where you think I should improve, because I'm pretty much new and I'm trying to just share as much as information as I can with you. So let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe to the channel. See you on the next video. Bye bye.